I want to start out by welcoming everyone to the Communication and Media Studies Career Day. This day is a collaboration between the Career Development Center and the Communication and Media Studies Department. I'm Christine Falcone. I'm an Associate Director in the Career Development Center. And throughout the day, we've invited alumni to join us for conversations about their careers in order to give you insight to different career paths, industries, and to get some advice on how to enter those fields. These sessions are recorded, as I mentioned, and our guest today for this slot is Katryna Perera. Welcome, Katryna.
Thank you.
So Katryna Perera is a 2016 Communication and Media Studies graduate of St. Joe's, who currently works as a reporter for the Frederick-News Post. Prior to her current role, she's worked as a news associate for CBS News and a broadcast associate for CBS This Morning. During her time at St. Joe's, she was a reporter and news editor of The Hawk and was an editorial intern for Philadelphia Magazine. I'm super excited to welcome Katryna back to Hawk Hill. I have a list of 10 questions I'm going to be asking her, and then we have time for questions and answers from all of you guys. So please make sure throughout the session, if Katryna says something that you feel really interested in learning more about, that you enter that question into the group chat. And this will allow us at the end to kind of see what's going on and what you guys are interested in. And Danielle from our office will be moderating those questions, and we'll be making sure that we get answers for you. So make sure throughout the session that you're doing that. All right, let's get started. Katryna, we want to start with an easy one for you. Can you describe within your current role, what are your core responsibilities? What does a typical day or a typical work week look like for you?
So the thing about journalism is that there is no typical day because it's news and it changes all the time. So I really don't like to say that I have a typical day. But I currently am an education reporter for a local paper in Maryland. So, my weeks consist of attending Board of Education meetings and other, school system committee meetings, and kind of keeping myself aware of kind of everything that's going on. I'm subscribed to, a ton of school system alerts. So I'm, constantly monitoring everything. And it's really just reporting out stories and finding new stories and talking to sources. And that's pretty much what my weeks and days consist of.
Cool. Well, and it's fun to have a schedule that's a little bit different every day, right? When did you know that this was your career path that you wanted to pursue? What led you to that decision?
So when I came to St. Joe's, I actually came in undecided. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And then I declared communications, I believe, my sophomore year. And I found out that there was a journalism class and I was interested in it. So I took it, and that kind of solidified my love for reporting. And it was kind of that class that then led me to join the Hawk and, do all of that, join Philadelphia Magazine as an intern and all of that. So that was really, it was a class at St. Joe's that really led me on this path.
What do you remember? What semester? What year were you when you took that journalism class?
Oh my gosh, I was a sophomore, so it must have been 2013. I think 2013. Okay. Yeah.
But sophomore year, after coming in undecided, you kind of felt your way through into maybe potentially this career path that you've landed in. Mm-hmm. Super cool. So you fell in love with journalism. You decided this is sort of where you wanted to head. What's the typical career path like for someone who's entry level within this field?
Yeah, I think that everybody's career path, journalism is such a weird field in that everybody kind of has their own path. Mm-hmm. Some people go to grad school. I went to grad school after St. Joe's. Some people just, kind of get a job right after college. It's really different for everyone, depending on kind of what you want to do and what type of journalism you want to do, whether it's print or radio or television. But I would say that with most people, I think it's kind of getting that entry level, either general assignment reporter or kind of like broadcast or news associate at a television network, or, something like that, that kind of gets your foot in the door. You're still sort of like an assistant, like an intern kind of thing, but, you have a role there, but I would say entry level positions are a lot of you being assigned things to do instead of you being able to pitch the stories that you want, which kind of sucks at the beginning, but you have to start somewhere. So yeah.
Yeah, and you get to the point where then all of a sudden you're making some of those decisions, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
When you're thinking about your current profession, what's something that you enjoy the most? What do you really like about what you do? And what's something you wish you could change?
So I love the fact that through my job, I get to meet so many people and so many different people. That's probably my favorite part of the job. I mean, I've met John McCain's wife. I've met, a double amputee who started a local support group. I mean, the range of people that I've met through my work has been incredible so far. So that's definitely my favorite part. The thing I wish I could change, um, I think with print journalism, it's obviously a dying field. And I think that I wish more people still appreciated it a little bit more. They took the time to sort of read the paper, whether it's in print or online. But I think that's kind of like a dying thing that people don't really read articles as much anymore. But I'm kind of biased because I'm a print journalist. But yeah, I think that's something that I could change. I wish we could like kind of regain that appreciation for journalism.
Mm, mm. Yeah, that's really interesting to think about where the field is headed, right? What are the trends in what you do? So I want to shift gears for a minute and focus on actions that students might take as they're thinking about their own career paths. And as we're shifting those gears, I just want to remind students that you can enter any questions into that Q&A. So make sure that you're going through that process if you want to. So I'm going to ask you about internships in a minute. But for now, what 2 to 3 experiences would you suggest students engage in while in college to help prepare them for entering this field upon graduation?
hmm Yeah. So, I mean, if you want to be a journalist, I would say that the Hawk is a great on campus, right there opportunity for you to do. I remember when I was the news editor for the Hawk, and I was always looking for writers. I mean, I was always in need of students who wanted to write news articles for me. So that's a really, really great way. I mean, I love the Hawk and I will always, kind of put it out there as a thing to do. It's a great organization. And you get so much experience. You get published clips that you can use, when you're applying to grad school, or when you're applying to those entry level jobs. It's such a great way to do that.
Mhm.
Also internships, you know, like I was an intern for Philadelphia Magazine. There's a ton of opportunities in the area. I think whatever medium you want to do, whether it's print, TV, or radio, there's always internships available. So it's another really great way. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned the Hawk. What else were you involved in on campus? Where were other places that you spent your time while you were a student here?
So the Hawk kind of took up all my time. I'm going to be honest. Um, yeah. It's as when you're an editor for the Hawk,
Mhm.
it's a very demanding thing on top of doing a full course load.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like my one thing, but I did Apex and I did other little things like that, but the Hawk was really my passion.
Your
So
thing. Really cool. I've heard that from students that when you're really in it with the Hawk, that it is a lot of time and energy, but obviously very fulfilling for you. So
mhm.
and for the students that I've met. So that's cool to hear that coming from an alum. How did your St. Joe's education impact how you work and the career decisions that you've made to date?
Yeah. So I think that an education from St. Joe's is a really holistic education, which I think has helped me, throughout my career, kind of being able to look at things from like a more holistic view and from different perspectives and things like that. But it also, I think, there's a lot of empathy that is emphasized in a Jesuit education, which I think is something that you really need as a journalist. You obviously you have to be objective and you have to maintain that when you're reporting, but being able to kind of put yourselves in the shoes of the people that you are reporting on, and especially when you're as a journalist, you always try to kind of lift up the voices of those who are marginalized. And I think that having that empathy and those core Jesuit values are something that, has really helped me do that.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, definitely. That's really interesting to think about how those values come through it as someone who reports out on what's happening in the world.
Mhm.
You mentioned internships. You mentioned you interned at Philly Magazine. Um, what types of internships do you think students should try to secure to prepare for a role like yours? And can you tell students a little bit about how you went about securing your internships? What was that process like for you?
Yeah. So I really only had that one internship when I wasn't when I was at St. Joe's. I don't know how it is now, but
Yeah.
I remember that it was kind of a difficult process to get an internship. Yeah, I mean, I only had the one, and I remember applying to a bunch. But I wouldn't be like discouraged if you kind of only get one internship your entire 4 years, or you have like a tough time with it, because obviously I ended up okay. So um but I think that, you know I don't know, I mean, every news organization, I think, is unique in the fact that they look for different things in their
Mm,
interns. So I would say doing your research and really knowing like what that news organization is about, what kinds of things they report on, what is their like, their niche is really,
mhm.
really important. And that's not just for internships. I think applying for jobs in journalism that's just as important.
Yeah.
And also kind of, I think having an idea of what you would like to cover for them is a good thing to have when applying. So yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned before we joined the students to Danielle and I that you cover education.
Mhm.
How did that happen? Was that intentional? Was that something that sort of was just the next step? How did you end up covering that particular topic?
Yeah. So when I went to grad school, I did a good amount of education reporting. It wasn't something that I sought out, but I kind of fell into it naturally. I really like education reporting. And then when I applied for the job that I'm in now, they actually had two beats available. They had education and they had crime and courts. And when I applied, I said, I have education reporting experience, but I would be open to the other beat, obviously. But then when they offered me the job, they offered me the education role, and I was happy to take it. So it was kind of a like I fell into it, but I didn't because I had
Yeah.
experience in it. So yeah.
And I know I'm going a little off script from some of our prepared questions, but you mentioned graduate school.
Hmm.
Um, Can you tell students a little bit about your decision making process? What made you decide to go to graduate school?
Hmm.
And what did you study in graduate school? What was that specific program that you went into?
Yeah. So I knew when I was approaching my senior year at St. Joe's, I knew that I wanted to go to grad school because, as much as I had the experience of the Hawk and the internship, I felt like I was really lacking in kind of that television journalism side, which I was
Mm,
interested in at the time.
mhm,
And I didn't have any experience in that. And I knew that I wanted to possibly go into that field. So I decided that grad school would be the next best step for me, not only to give me the exposure to television journalism, but to also help me kind of just deepen my skills as a reporter and really be able to kind of dig in and, come out the other side as like a really good reporter.
mhm,
Um, so that was what led me to grad school. It's not for everybody. It is a huge investment. But I ended up going to Columbia, their graduate school of journalism. And it was a year program and it was super, super intense. They tell you not to even get another job while you're in the program because that's how time consuming it is. Um, but yeah, I mean, it was a year of really, really intense and hard work. And, the thing about going to grad school also is that somewhere like Columbia, you have this network of people after that is across the globe. I mean, I know
mhm.
journalists, literally from Asia to Latin America. So I have contacts all over the place now, which is great.
Yeah.
And when applying for jobs, just like you have your St. Joe's network, now you have another network on top of that that's really
Mhm.
specific to your field. So yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
Hmm.
I know a lot of students, as they're coming towards the end of their time at St. Joe's, are thinking about all of their options, and sometimes graduate school comes into play for them. So it's always helpful to hear how someone else kind of thought through that process, and what you thought about that process. So that was really helpful. Thank you. Um, Two final questions for me before I'm going to open it up to students. Um, what is something you wish someone had told you when you were in school?
Um, I wish somebody had told me not to feel like I have to rush. I think that when I graduated from St. Joe's and the first couple of years after that, I felt like I had to rush to be like the most successful reporter or be at, like the New York Times or like, some
Mhm.
national news organization. Like I felt like I was falling behind. Um, but, then I started to realize like, okay, I'm only like 25 or 26. Like I have an entire life ahead of me to, be whatever I want to be and, do the reporting that I want to do. So that was something that I wish somebody had like told me when I was at St. Joe's. And also, I mean, I think you define success for yourself, right?
Mhm.
So, I went to this really prestigious grad school, but I'm a local reporter. And I think sometimes when people find out that I'm a local reporter, and they know my background of Columbia, they're like, those two don't go together. But I really love what I do and I love local reporting. So, you have to kind of define what is successful for you,
Mhm.
and not kind of define it by society's standards. So,
Yeah, that's really interesting to think about. What's one thing you love about local reporting? Tell me about
um,
that.
yeah, I mean, each community is so different, right? It's so like unique, and there's a whole until you get down to kind of like that grassroots level, you don't realize how much is going on in this tiny little community.
Mhm.
And you really get to know the people there and you really get to know the inner workings. And, sometimes I think the drama that goes on a local level is far exceeds any drama on a national level. And it's
Mhm.
more impactful, right? Like it actually impacts people's lives
Mhm.
way more directly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Interesting. Thanks. All right. Final question. What is a piece of advice you would give to students who are interested in this path?
Um, I would say, join the Hawk. Um, get an internship if you can. Published clips are such an important thing
Mm,
to have.
mm,
If you, want to be a journalist, especially if you want to be a print journalist or, web journalist or whatever, published clips are really, really important. Um, if you want to go into television, a reel is really important to have. And that's something that you can put together if you get an internship at a television station. Um, but other than that, I would just say, also um, don't look down on smaller publications that are like super, super niche, because sometimes those are the places that will actually give you an opportunity to kind of do some really, really good reporting and kind of dig deep into issues. So, kind of things like trade magazines and smaller websites, don't kind of push those to the side. So.
yeah. Yeah, that's really great advice. I know in our office, we see lots of cool postings come through Handshake and some other platforms that we use. And, in working with students in their internship searches, I try to emphasize that same thing, right? Be really open and feel it out through the interview process, because smaller organizations have a bigger need sometimes, and you get to put your hand in a couple of different pots. So it's great to hear that advice coming from you, Katryna. So I want to give students a chance to ask questions. Now that you've heard a little bit about Katryna and what she does and how she kind of got there, I'd love to hear what you guys are curious about. I'm going to spotlight Danielle so she can ask questions that come through the chat. And of course, I always have more questions. And if anyone here has met with me, they know that. But I want first to give students the opportunity to ask questions if you have any. So just put those in the chat.
Everybody,
Danielle,
oh,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, like Christine said, go ahead and put any questions you have in the chat. And while you're doing that, I'll just kick things off with a question for you, Katryna. You mentioned networking. How did networking, did you tap into your professional or your personal network to land any of your internships or your jobs? Just curious to hear more about that.
Yeah, so my time at CBS, that was really, I wouldn't say that I like got it because of Columbia, but you know, I definitely used the resources that Columbia gave me to land those positions. And you know, even when I've applied to other jobs, I mean, I've found out that, you know, I know people, or, you know, Columbia alumni work at X publication, and I've been able to reach out to them and say, you know, hey, I'm an alumni too, like, you know, I applied, that sort of thing. So yeah, I've definitely used networking to kind of, you know, put my name at the top of the list, or kind of put my foot in the door a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, it usually plays a big role that way. Thank you. We have a couple of questions coming in through the chat. What advice would you give to students looking for an internship that may not have that much experience yet?
Just keep applying. You know, I would say in your cover letter, really emphasize why you want the internship and how the internship is going to help you. I think that that's something that I always try to strive for in my cover letters is, you know, I obviously have experience, but what is this new opportunity going to help me do? You know, like, what is an opportunity with your organization going to help me? How is it going to help me move forward? I think that's something that's really good to add in cover letters. I think that organizations appreciate that. Like, how can, you know, obviously we're looking for somebody, but at the same time, how can we help you kind of grow into this better journalist? I hope that answers that question. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Another question, what has been the biggest hurdle you had to overcome to get where you are now? And there's a second part to that question about COVID, but I'll let you answer that first part first.
That's an interesting question. I don't think I've ever thought about that. Biggest hurdle. I think that, after I graduated from Columbia, I went to work for CBS for 2 years. And at the time, I thought that I wanted to do television news. And as the 2 years went on, I realized that I didn't want to do it, and that I really, really missed writing and sort of that traditional print journalism role. So I had to do a huge pivot. And for those 2 years, I wasn't producing any clips. I had nothing to show employers, you know, in the print world, like, hey, this is what I've done for the past 2 years. I didn't have anything. So that was something that I had to like go back into my Hawk archives of things that I had written, and, you know, really like craft my cover letters and really be, you know, really good in interviews, because I had nothing to show for the past 2 years except, you know, that I worked for CBS. That was it. So when print employers interviewed me, you know, they definitely asked why I didn't have that, and why I wanted to do the change. So that was probably one of the biggest hurdles that I've had to get through. And there was a second part to that question, right?
Yeah. So the second part to that question was, how has COVID affected your day-to-day work life?
So I'm working from home. I have been for the past year. It's a lot of phone interviews, a lot of Zoom interviews with sources. I don't really go out into the field that much unless I absolutely have to. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much the same, except obviously you don't have like, your newsroom, you don't have your colleagues working right there with you. You can't bounce ideas off of them. You can't be like, hey, do you have the number for this person? Or, is there somebody in this office that that I can call? So there's definitely like a lack of collaboration. I mean, collaboration has lessened, I guess. But at the same time, COVID has taken over my beat. So that's all I report on anymore because of school openings and all of that. So yeah, my education beat has completely changed since COVID happened.
So changes, but maybe brought you some new opportunities as well. Okay, a couple other questions here. Are there any writing exercises that you do or you used to do to work on your skills? Good one.
Headline writing. That's a great thing. That's a great skill to have. I've actually lost my skill at headline writing. I was really good when I was at the Hawk. And now my headlines absolutely suck and my editors always change them. But if you can maintain that, that's like a really useful and like fun skill to have, because headlines are what are going to bring in your reader, right? So if you can craft a good headline, that's really good. And also craft a good lead. Headline is number one, but your lead is number two. It's going to keep the reader going. So yeah, one piece of advice that an editor gave me recently was if you're like covering like a meeting or something, something that's really mundane, like I cover Board of Education meetings all the time. And he told me, in your lead, never say a meeting happened. Tell me what the color is of the meeting. That should be up front. Never say this person met, this happened. Like that can come later, but what is going to grab the reader about the meeting? What is the information that they want to know up front? So that's really changed my lead writing since then.
That's great advice. All right, another question, sort of going off of that. Are there any independent or personal reporting expeditions you would do on your own to feel out the field before actually getting a formal job? Or I guess if you were, looking to get a job, was there anything that you would do leading up to that in the field to try to get a better feel for what the job was?
Well, freelancing is always an option. If you have ideas of stories, if you have, pitches, you can report them out and you can write your story and, pitch it to different publications. And that's a great way for somebody to feel out what it's like to do it, I guess, without being committed somewhere. And, you have obviously all the time in the world, which can be a good or a bad thing, depending on your project. But I think that that's a great way to sort of have no pressure and to do a story and get a feel for things before you, I guess, commit somewhere. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's good advice. Was there anything that you did when you were getting ready for this job in education to maybe prepare yourself for the education field specifically?
I don't think I did anything before I took the job, but since I've taken the job, just to make sure that I'm on top of all the education jargon and news and all of that, I read like really specific like education publications like Education Week and the Chronicle of Higher Education and things like that. And I'm always saying I follow a bunch of education journalists on Twitter, and I'm always reading their work to see what they're doing. I've gotten ideas from them for my own reporting. So that's a really great way, to prepare for whatever beat you're going to do.
Okay, great, thank you. So switching gears a little bit, for those students that are interested in graduate school, can you talk about the process of pursuing that path and how different it is from undergraduate education?
Yeah, so like I said, my year at Columbia, it was just 1 year. And it is very different. Now, I don't know how other grad schools are going to work, but it was very different from a bachelor's degree. And, when you're at St. Joe's, you go to class, you have 50 minutes in a class, and then you have an assignment that you have to do, all of that, right? Like it's very much like school. Columbia, it was like I was a working reporter. So my classes were like their own little news organization, each one. And I only had, I don't know, like 3 each semester. And we only met once a week. The rest of the week, I was supposed to be out in New York City on my beat, reporting out my stories, pitching constantly. So I was literally a working reporter in New York City, but I wasn't getting paid for it, right? I was just contributing to my classes' online websites. So it's like you have a full-time job. You're not really a student. You're a journalist essentially. And you're not really like taking tests or, quizzes or anything like that. You're literally out in the field doing it.
That's awesome. Great experience. We actually have a question from one of our professors. He says, I've been talking to a student who is thinking about going to grad school for journalism, and he was asking about a specialization. Do you think it's worth it to think about a possible specialization, even in undergrad, like getting a minor in a science or criminal justice? Would that give you a leg up or narrow your job prospects?
Yeah, definitely. I think if that's something that you are super, super interested in and you want to cover, then yes, absolutely. Getting a minor, or, there are different grad programs that have like a data specialization and investigative specialization. Those are always great things to do. If you absolutely know that you are going to love it and that's what you want to do, then yes, 100%.
Great, thank you. That is all the questions we have in the chat right now. If anyone else has a question, you can feel free to unmute yourselves at this moment before we wrap things up, to ask Katryna anything else you might want to add.
I know I thought of a question as you were talking,
Perfect.
Katryna, and thinking about how collaboration has changed slightly since COVID. And I was trying to picture you at work, right? Not now in the COVID world, but in the non-COVID world. What does collaboration normally look like at your job, right? You're covering education, there's people covering other topics. How do you collaborate on a team? What does that look like? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I am one of like 8 reporters at my paper. I mean, we each have a different beat. But a lot of times our stories overlap. Like, for example, I recently did a piece with two of my colleagues. It was about officers in school resource officers. And so, I worked with my crime and courts reporter, and I worked with my local government reporter because, there was some government stuff, that bills and policies and stuff that were involved. So, there are a lot of topics that kind of overlap, and that collaboration comes in a lot there when, you both kind of do your own reporting on your different beats, and then you bring it together for one story. Or, when I was in the newsroom, like I said, it was always, if I needed a number for somebody who I didn't have, or, I needed somebody's take on this, or I needed to understand something a little bit better that isn't on my beat, they were right there and I could just ask them. So
Yeah, cool, thanks. I can see that Mike has his hand raised. Mike, I'd love to call on you.
Thanks. Hey, Katryna.
Hi.
I have a couple of questions. So I'm wondering, though, you are primarily a print journalist. Do you work in multimedia at all? Do you think about kind of like podcasting or even photography, that kind of thing? That's one question I had, and I'm going to steal another question from Stephen from a previous one, which is like, if you could have taken a class in college that you think, as an undergraduate, that really would have helped you, that you didn't have a chance to take, what would it be if you could design a class?
I think, the whole reason I went to grad school was because I didn't have that like television multimedia class at St. Joe's. So yeah, if I could have had that, if I could have learned like, how to write a script for an anchor, or if I could have, learned how to do a little bit more video editing before I graduated, that would have been really, really awesome and really helpful. And I'm not sure that I would have gone to grad school had I had that. And then, yeah, I mean, at our paper, we have a podcast. We haven't done it in a long time because of COVID. I mean, it kind of squashed that. But we have a podcast, we do video. The reporters are less so like, we focus a lot on our stories. I would say that our photographers do more of the multimedia stuff. But that's just how it works where I am. But it's not like I've never touched the podcast equipment. I've taken it out into the field and done little, interviews and stuff like that. But it's definitely good to have. There's so many multimedia journalist positions open now, where people are looking for a photographer and a reporter, or a producer and a video editor. Like it's, those roles are being combined. So yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions for Katryna before we say a big thank you? Okay. All right. I see some silence. So that's good. That means that we're at a nice stopping point. So if everyone could just please join me in thanking Katryna for joining us today and providing really great insight into her career path. Katryna, we're so grateful for your time today. We hope to see you back on Hawk Hill sometime soon. Thank you, Katryna.
Thanks, Katryna.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.